You can see that the ruminant digestive system is totally different from that of the other digestive system, and of course it is totally a different system. And when compared to the monogastric animals, this system is having the difference that it is totally dependent upon the microbial digestion system. Hence, one need to know that this system is containing rumen, reticulum, omasum, and abomasum, as rightly mentioned in this photograph. The starting from the esophagus, the rumen, reticulum, omasum, and abomasum. So the rumen fermentation is one of the important process in which the microbial digestion takes place in the ruminants, and we need to see that different microflora, ruminant microflora, are the name given to them, and it is totally different from that of the regular digestive system of the other animals. So the rumen fermentation is world largest commercial fermentation space. For example, we have got the fermentation space in different type of the industries. For example, the liquor industries, then also the bread or the butter industries, and many more. But the microflora which are participating in rumen digestion are more than that of all these things. So here the rumen digestion takes place in 100 billion liters of rumen volume of the domestic animals which are present on this earth. Then it raised to 10 raised to 10 to 10 raised to 12 cells per ml. That's also another thing. Then that means each ml of the rumen liquor contains 10 raised to 10 to 10 raised to 12 cells per ml. Then rumen capacity ranges from less than 1 liter or half quarter in a small ruminant, and also a greater size of 200 liters or 50 gallons in a bigger cow. So this is very ranging from a small ruminant to a bigger ruminant. Then ruminants are the one which have the continuous culture fermenters. It is not a stagnant system. New culture is always being added, and input and output is always there because the animal consumes new food, new water, and the process is going to be continued for longer. Hence, this system is very interesting and also complicated. And here we can also see the lignocellulosic substrates like forages are digested. Forages are digested. And cellulose complex and also hemicellulose, which are very difficult to be digested by all the other non-ruminant animals or the monogastric animal. And nitrogen capture or the non-proteinous nitrogens also play an important role like the urea. And 8 to 10 raised to 15 mouths to feed means in a because of these microbial enzymes, ruminants can utilize feedstuffs that provide little or no nutritional benefit to the non-ruminant animals, because the non-ruminant animals, like including the human beings, may be an exception of the horse. Then other than the horse, we have got the rabbits, etc., which also eat the grass. But it is, even though it's a monogastric animal, it's not the ruminant. Whereas the dog, cat, human beings, they are all the monogastric animals who cannot digest the grass. Hence, this is the specialty of the ruminants, what we can see from this particular chapter is concerned. Then the four steps of the rumination are here. Number one, there is regurgitation. It's also called as the reverse peristalsis movement of the food to mouth. It is called as the reverse fermentation. Then, whereas the second one is also known as the remastication. This is remastication, in which the food is squeezed from bolus, and also from the bolus sizes is are reduced and swallowed back. Whereas the bolus is rechewed back, then re-insalivation. So adding more and more saliva to the already formed food and saliva mixture. Then lastly, the redeglutition is also called as the swallowing the bolus already formed with that of the other liquid. So these processes are also combined with that of another important process known as the rumination. Rumination allows animals to forage and eat food rapidly, then store for later digestion, then reduce particle size. Only small particles leave rumen reticulum, then increase the surface area of the microbial attachment to that particular feed or the fodder block. Then the fermentation happens, then breaks down this cellulose into smaller particles that can be digested later with the help of the microbes. Then further stimulation of the saliva flow, for example, the saliva serves as a buffer in the rumen. For example, if the rumen pH settles down from the normal pH of the rumen, which is ranging from 7 to 7.4, then the alkalization will be maintained always to the extent of 7.4, even though it falls down. And the rumination time is another thing which is also a characteristic of a ruminant. Then each ruminant, here you can see that it takes about 8 hours for rumination. Then eating only, suppose a ruminant or a cow, if you observe from a distance, you can find this that the animal takes about 8 hours only for eating. Then rumination 8 hours, then resting 8 hours. So totally it is 24 hours. Then the ruminating time is quite valuable, especially there is high variation between different type of the ruminants. Then reducing the forage size, concentrate decreases the rumination, whereas the fiber content is going to have more and ruminations for each minute. Then reducing the particle size of the forage decreases at time spent. So all the animals that do ruminate, they will take back the feed from the rumen in the reverse direction, then chew it once again and push it back to the rumen for the easy digestion from that of the microbial flora. So what's the mechanism of rumination or regurgitation? It's a totally a different process, and it is a reverse process when compared to all other domestic animals. Especially the monogastric animals can never take the feedback, or else it's called as the omission, and it's a dangerous thing, especially in case of the other animals. Whereas in case of the ruminant, there is a stimulus from the digester of the fiber itself, or the fiber what is consumed by the ruminant will be converted to a fiber mat scratching surface near the cardiac sphincter. So it irritates the cardiac sphincter, and the contraction of reticulum forces digesta to the cardia area. Then animal inhales the epiglottis with closed, produces a vacuum, especially inside the buccal cavity or oral cavity. Then cardiac sphincter opens and esophagus dilates. Then negative pressure is caused, that's called as the vacuum sucks digesta into esophagus. Then later it enters into the rapid reverse peristalsis. Then the digesta moves into the stomach. That's another important process. So this process is a continuous process that happens always in the animals, and also many times the monogastric animals, and apart from that one, the animals which can eat grass. So this is one of the important process, especially in case of the ruminant digestive system. So what happens? What are all the mechanisms of rumination? So it includes the remastication, resalivation, another thing, then redeglutition, deglutition or REDU, REDEGLUTION. So first a bolus is formed, then the bolus is considered for chewing slower than more deliberate during the initial eating. So this is the thing. Whereas later the digesta is reinsalivated. So what are all the glands involved are the different types of the glands are the parotid salivary gland, mandibular salivary gland, and the different types of the glands are present, especially in case of the animals with which digest the uh, especially the fiber. And saliva from parotid glands secrete bicarbonate. This is also another thing, bicarbonate, which is having alkaline pH other than that of the other glands. Then the resalivation or re-swallowing process, after re-swallowing, the rumen contracts to move swallowed bolus into rumen. So it is in the both direction. One is in the forward direction and another one is the reverse direction. So this is the two type of the process where in which a normal monogastric animal can never do it. So the problem with cellulose, especially in the monogastric animals, why they can digest is because it is having the herbivorous food contains lot of cellulose. Example, it is the grass, as in case of the cattle. The mammals cannot produce cellulase, that is the enzyme which is required for the digestion of the cellulose. Whereas the ruminants have got large storage chamber called as the rumen, and the rumen contains large number of bacteria which do produce the cellulose enzyme that plays an important role in the digestion of the cellulose. So the bacteria and the ruminant both are getting benefit from each other, and this is known as the mutualism or symbiosis. So you should know this term mutualism or symbiosis. So this is a characteristic process. So this is the structure of a cellulose or starch. So there is a difference between the cellulose. So this is the structure of the glucose. What it says, it's called as the beta glucose. Then if one hydrogen moiety is remitted, then two beta glucose molecules they form the glucose. They will have a glucosidic bond inside this thing with that of the water moiety. Then they may produce the beta glucose. Then condensation of two beta glucose molecules will cause the cellulose digestion. So the food chewed a second time, another especially in case of the ruminants, always it is called as the grass is ground by chewing, and it is swallowed and passes into the rumen. So the chewed grass here, it enters the rumen, then it once again stays sometimes for the rumen, reticulum, then rumen, then it is swallowed back, and it is called as the this food chewed at the second time. Two times the animals are going to choose. First time it is a coarse particle will be there, whereas in the second time they are going to make it as the fine particles. So food chewed in the second time will directly float inside. This is a rumen which is having the gravity, more and more gravity will settle here, and this is the one, the pathway. The masticated food goes from the upper pathway, then enters the especially abomasum. It is called as the true stomach. Abomasum is called as the true stomach. Then, as usual, it descends to duodenum, then small intestine, ileum, rectum, and colon. As usual in case of the other animals. So, the animals, the process can be divided into two processes. Whenever a freshly chewed grass is going to be settled in the bottom of the rumen, so the freshly chewed grass always settles in the bottom of the rumen. Then later, with the help of certain enzymes, etc., microbial digestion takes place. Then it flows. Later, it enters once again the esophagus, getting chewed, then comes up with this pathway. Here you can see that this pathway, it is the one which is ultimately direct to the abomasum, then duodenum, etc., and of course the reticulum. So later it descends down in the small intestine, large intestine, ileum, rectum, and colon. So this is the way how the pathway of the grass takes place in a ruminant. So what happens in the rumen is the bacteria in the rumen secrete very huge quantity of the cellulase enzyme. So this enzyme is one of the important enzyme, and this is secreted by the ruminants, then providing energy for growth of the bacteria, and it is hydrolyzed by the cellulose is hydrolyzed by the enzyme cellulase to the glucose and providing energy for the growth of the bacteria. Glucose is used by the bacteria for the anaerobic respiration of their own. Then the cellulose is converted to glucose. Then the ruminants are usually dependent upon the volatile fatty acids, VFAs. So the bacteria absorb the glucose, they get the energy from the cellulose, whereas the anaerobic digestion takes place from the bacteria, whereas the fatty acids and methane produced as the waste products of the bacterial digestion. They are also called as volatile fatty acids because their specific gravity is low and they float. So these volatile fatty acids are absorbed by the rumen wall, which is a very big few this thing. Then they provide the energy to the rumen. Here, the byproducts of the bacterial digestion are the methane and also the sometimes the carbon dioxide. So methane gas is also known as the greenhouse gas. So the bacterial digestion makes the cellulose to be converted into fatty acid, and these are absorbed by the ruminant and used in the respiration. So this is responsible for the ruminant energy source. So here there are different steps have been explained. For example, this is the glucose structure. This is the glucose structure. So this glucose is utilized by the bacteria to form the methane, carbon dioxide and methane. Both gases are accumulated inside the rumen and erectated out. Whereas the hexose sugar also going to be formed the methane and carbon dioxide. For example, the C6H12O6, which is also the glucose moiety, ultimately the ethanoic acid is produced and ultimate and end product is the methane. Enormous quantity of the methane is produced in the bacterial digestion. Then the ruminants are having the capacity to survive. Even the protein quality is very, very low, unlike the human being, because the nitrogen what may be taken is not part of the protein. For example, the urea, what we add. Some bacteria in the rumen use urea as source of nitrogen to make their own protein. Then this protein is used for bacterial reproduction. Then some bacteria are swallowed with chewed cud already. Then bacterial protein is then digested in the abomasum, duodenum as in the other animals. So this is the source of the protein, and amino acids produced are absorbed into the small intestine and used to make the cow protein because of combination of different amino acids. The bacteria have converted the waste urea into protein to supplement the diet. That's why the urea treatment, especially it's successful thing, and up to 2% of urea is can be easily fed to the cattle without any much problem. That's what the research says. Then nitrogen metabolism in the ruminant and some urea from the deamination is recycled and the saliva is combined with that of the urea and ultimately it enters the rumen. Then there it is converted to the proteins. Whereas the saliva plus urea also and is contributing to the pH of the rumen and the in the liver the deamination of different amino acids takes place. Then the urea is produced. Once again, it mixes with saliva. Then the urea is mixed with saliva. It goes into the rumen, and sometimes it is directly going as into the urea. Urea is converted to urine. In the urine, lot of urea is also present. Then here another system is there. Grass plus saliva plus urea. All these three are given. What happens? See here you can see that the grass enters the mouth of the ruminant and it mixed with saliva. Then what happens? The cellulose is acted by cellulase enzyme under the production of the bacteria. Then cellulose is converted to glucose. Then this glucose itself is taken up by the bacteria for their growth and the reproduction. And these gross saliva and urea once again they are converted to urea plus grass protein. Then they are once again acted by the bacteria to produce the bacterial growth and the ultimate end product of this thing is the methane and carbon dioxide and volatile fatty acids. Whereas these volatile fatty acids are very much useful to the ruminants. They enter the abomasum and duodenum, then they are converted to the fatty acids, required fatty acids, then absorbed plus respiratory. Whereas the bacteria also grow and they also release lot of proteins which are required to the ruminant. Then directly they are converted to peptides. Peptides are converted to amino acids. Amino acids are absorbed from this intestine and made as the required protein to the cattle. So this is the process how it is going to be take place. Then here another figure is there which says that the digestion and utilization of carbohydrates. Yesterday we have learned the carbohydrates are the important diet of the cattle in the form of the cellulose, hemicellulose and also the starch plus lignin and these enter the rumen a very big fermentation vat. Then there they are going to be fermented out. Ultimately the volatile fatty acids like acetic acid, propionic acid and butyric acids are produced, whereas the bacterial byproducts are the methane then carbon dioxide are erectated out, erectation process. Then this acetic acid, propionic acid, and butyric acid they enter the tissue metabolism. Then they are converted to the required materials, especially in case of ruminants. So the fermentation products are entering the abomasum plus intestine. Then the unfermented carbohydrates and sugars are being accumulated, especially in case of abomasum and also partially intestine. Then these are sometimes not digested properly, then undigested carbohydrates are put outside the feces, especially in case of the cattle, and it is called as the manure because of the microbial fermentation partially digested. So no fiber can 100% digested, especially in case of the uh, ruminants. So the fat digestion is also another different process. Tomorrow's class or on Monday's class we will discuss all these things. It is divided into saturated and unsaturated fat. So saturated fat is converted to saturated fats are divided and unsaturated fat is converted to saturated fat. Saturated fat stays as such in the rumen. Then in the abomasum also, it is going to be absorbed later from the intestine and also from the large intestine, etc. Then undigested fat is passed in the feces, and that's called as the steatoria, especially in case of cattle. And whatever the quantity of the fat required by the animal, they are passed into the tissue metabolism. Then the required fats, especially the steroids, and also many more requirement is fulfilled. So this is the gross picture how cuts are chewed and also saliva is added to the mastication process here. Then the cuts are placed at rear part of the rumen here. The cuts are placed the rear part of the rumen. Then cuts from the front layer are erected out. So here the gases are produced like methane and carbon dioxide. They are erected out in the reverse direction, and the small particles which are present in the rumen, they gradually sink down. So what we can say is this is the A of the day 3, and this is the digested of day 2, and this is today's hay which is floating. So that's how we can classify that. Whereas the same thing which happens in the other masticating animals like the sheep or goat also. So goat also has got the same type of the system which starts from the esophagus, then it moves to the rumen, then reticulum, omasum, abomasum, then small intestine, large intestine. So the fecal material is passed out down through the anus as an organic farming. So the reducing particle size of the intestinal species is the main purpose of the mastication. So chewing during eating is minimal, preparation and swallowing. Then, apart from this one, they release the soluble constituents. Then, damage to the plant tissue for microbial attachment, because if the surface area of a plant tissue is round and smooth, the bacteria cannot attack. Hence, the mastication or chewing makes them into smaller particle size. Later, they are getting attacked by the microbial attachment. Then chewing during the remastication process is an extensive procedure which decreases the particle size of a passage especially. Then damage the plant tissue also for microbial attachment. Then once the microbe attach, then microbial digestion takes place. Then rumen or reticulum, it contracts to the greater extent to pass out, especially the food material which is present in the rumen. So hence we can say that this is the rumino-reticular contraction which pushes the food down. Then rumen contractions are another thing. Here you can say that every ruminant has got the rumen contraction level, and it is inoculate incoming feed and microbials, because whenever a big rumen is there, then it need to contract to mix the content which are inside the rumen. Then they are going to minimize the effect of the stratification, move fermentation process to the volatile fatty acid to the rumen wall, and rumen wall, especially the volatile fatty acids, they are all absorbed into the rumen surface like this. They will be absorbed into the circulation. Then particle sorting and passage of small particles to the omasum. Smaller and smaller particles are passed into the omasum. Then once again the rumination takes place. Then erectation of fermentation gases, especially the carbon dioxide and methane, not the volatile fatty acids, because they are all absorbed from the rumen wall. So what is the needs of the eructation? Because enormous quantity of the gas is produced, remain gas produced. So what are all those gases? So the main gas is the methane or and also the carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is up to the extent of 65%. Then methane is, of course, it is variable, but 27.76. Then apart from this one, the nitrogen gas is also produced. Then oxygen. Sometimes it is said that the cows are the only animals which also exhales the oxygen. But it is also, to the extent it's correct, but it is very, very less, 0.56%. Then hydrogen gas, apart from this one, the hydrogen sulfide, which gives the rumen liquor a bad smell is concerned. Hence, one need that these are the gases which we say that these gases are the part of the erectation process. So here we can see that peak gas production occurs 30 minute to 2 hour post feeding, that's 12 to 27 liters per minute. It is enormous quantity, 12 to 27 liters per minute. Average is 1 to 2 liters per minute. So, approximately 30% of the carbon dioxide produced in the rumen is absorbed into the blood and removed through the lungs. So, even though the 65% of the gas is carbon dioxide, whereas the 50% of it approximately, then 30% of this thing or 20% of the total gas is absorbed into the circulation, goes to the alveoli of the lungs and get erectated out. Only 20% of the methane is removed through the lungs. So methane is not removed through the lungs, whereas only more quantity of the carbon dioxide is removed through the lungs, and hence the 27.76% of the methane is considered as dangerous to the earth because of the greenhouse effect. And we will see what is the adverse effect of the methane on the greenhouse effect on the earth. So only 20% of the methane is removed through the lungs, whereas 80% is erectated out. That means more and more methane is erectated out, and only the 20% methane which is dissolved in the dung is utilized for the production of the gobar gas or natural gas from many of the farmers in this country. So here you can see that the grasses are always floating in the rumen, just like the today's hay are always noted as the green color, then grain and yesterday's hay are always settled down. So the stomach is filled with always the feed. Suppose a cattle is about 350 kgs, 150 liters is the capacity of the rumen, and more than 75% of that thing is the food which is digested and about to be digested. Then control of the erectation. So this erectation is an important process. Every minute it will happen, and almost all the methane gas which is produced in excess will be erectated out. Then there are certain drugs which also going to cause the also going to cause the fight response. Then inhibition of erectation will cause the animal to bloat, and ruminant pressures will be increased up to 100 millimeter of mercury if there is a choke. Then stable broth and foam formed in the foam also. So here the microbial digestion takes place. Let microbes feed ruminant. So this is give and take policy. Always this is a continuous policy, especially in the ruminants, because the ruminants are dependent on the microbial flora for the digestion of the cellulose, and ultimately they are providing the proper environment to the bacteria to produce volatile fatty acids, then also the microbial protein, and also the vitamin B1, B6, and B12, which are water soluble mineral, vitamins. And there is one statement that the nutrients presented to the animal after ruminal fermentation are very different that don't enter in the rumen as feed. So, a worst quality hay is converted to the best quality food, especially when they come out of the rumen. Then rumen digestion and fermentation. So degradable feed is converted to the rumen from the rumen microbial flora is going to act, and it is going to produce so many materials, especially the carbon dioxide, then the volatile fatty acids, microbial cells, ammonia, methane, heat, long chain fatty acids, and a small quantity is produced by this process is the hydrogen sulfide, and it gives a bad odor to the ingesta. So here the products listed in black and green are not usable by the animal. So black and green, the hydrogen sulfide and methane or heat, they are not at all used by the animal, whereas the VFA and microbial cells are digested back, and they are once again the part of the ruminal digestion. Whereas the products listed in green are primary energy losses. For example, methane is a loss of energy, and production of heat is also another loss of energy by the rumen. Whereas the products which are mentioned in the red are used by the post terminal, just like the volatile fatty acids and also long term chain fatty acids. So the location of the microflora in the ruminant is in different position. Then if you take the gross cutting of the rumen, then this is called as the ruminal wall, and it's a thin wall which is made up of the different type of the cells, and once in 2 minutes it's going to contract. Ruminal contraction is also another process. Whereas the gas phase upper always, as the gas are having low specific gravity, they will float in the upside of the rumen. Whereas the fiber mat, the this one is known as the fiber mat. The mat is formed by the fiber mat, and below this thing, the rumen fluid will be present, and lot of bacteria will also be acting on the uh, location of the microbes. Then the rumen microorganisms, which are very much required for the nutritional requirement of a ruminant animal. So the end products are the carbon dioxide, energy, then also it produces nutrition, minerals, and vitamins. So the energy is from fermentation of the sugar, then the nitrogen, or later it's going to be converted to the protein, etc. They will be converted to ammonia. Majority of nitrogenous feeds to contain the ammonia. So that the cost of feed is also estimated by the presence of the naturally occurring nitrogenous substance. So the ultimately the vitamins are present, and no, they are not required to the animal. And here we have to make one caution that the vitamins are none required in the mixed culture of bacteria. It is not secret required for the bacteria which are present in the stomach of ruminant animals. Then symbiotic relationship between living together. I think everyone knows this thing. It is called as the symbiosis, or it is also called as the joint life. So the microbes provide the an environment for the easy life of the ruminants, and at the same time they produce quality protein production of the volatile fatty acids. Then they also provide the B complex vitamins with detoxification of toxic compounds. So the ruminal microflora have got a lot of advantageous effect on the animal health because they try to digest the cellulose and hemicellulose by secreting the cellulase enzyme, and also they produce very high quality protein production to the volatile fatty acid in the form of the VFAs, then B complex, etc., are produced by the microflora, and once they die, that B complex vitamin will be useful to the ruminants. Then digestion of cellulose and hemicellulose, as all this way what we are talking is digestion of cellulose or hemicellulose. But sometimes if the owner has not got very good quality of the celluloses, then the microbial digestion get reduced. The animal get weak. Then also the wear and tear of the teeth, etc., will be present if the proper nutritional materials are not provided. The microbes, then also the hay, both need to be produced so that the ruminants can produce the valuable products out of this thing. So the ruminants need to provide the high quality proteins. So what do you mean by high quality protein is the 50 to 80% of absorbed nitrogen is from microbes. In many type of the cakes, etc., we used to call the persons and they used to provide us the non-proteinous nitrogen in the form of the urea or whatever it may be. And at the same time they were also responsible for bringing us some of the food, especially to the ruminants. So high biological value protein sources are the amino acid pattern is very similar to that of the required by the ruminant animal. So the microbes also acts as a feed source because bacteria and protozoa are washed out of the rumen to omasum, and ultimately they will be coming to the abomasum. Then acidic environment kills the microorganisms, especially the abomasum, but the digested and absorbed the same as any other feed source in stomach and small intestine. Then the microbes also provide the amino acids, and some part of the energy is contributed by the microorganisms. Hence, it is also called as symbiotic life or symbiosis. And the source of the energy is only the volatile fatty acids, the VFAs, or earlier they were also called as the just fatty acids. Now they have added the VFAs are the special fatty acids produced only in case of ruminant to the extent of 70%, whereas the microbial cells are up to the extent of 20%, and digestible unfermented feed is 20%. Let us, for example, we can take, but it may not give us the certain result. It may take one week or more. So what many farmers complain that I have administered the some of the ingredients that is called as the gloves, etc. So these are unfermented feeds because 70% is volatile fatty acid, then 10% is microbial cell, and remaining 20% is digestible unfermented feed, and no glucose is available for the ruminant. Then this concentration of VFAs, what they say is, in the case of rumen, it will be totally extending up to 50 to 125 micromoles per unit meter of the de- unit meter of the carbohydrates. Then, whether the ruminants can produce vitamins, the answer is yes, always. They are nothing to do with that of the regular digestion system, what is having some traditional mentalistic setup. Then apart from this one, the rumen also functions as one of the very good detoxifying or the toxic compounds. So we hear very less about the toxicity of pesticides unless it is malicious. Then the mimosine is a leukocephala is causes the problems, poor growth, reproduction, and there will be a hair loss is always a problem, especially uh, Hawaiian ruminants are susceptible, but not from the Australia. So they have the microbes that degrade mimosine. So Lucina leucocephala can be fed to the Australian cattle, which are not susceptible Lucina. Then these are transferred fluid obtained from the Hawaiian cattle to Australia. Then they are incubated, and the Australian cattle are very well inoculated from the ruminal microflora that is taken from outside. So the to inoculate induced rumen and Australian cattle feed also get digested after the inoculation of rumens into Australian cattle. So the feed Lucina safely nowadays can be taken by the Australian cattle as I see is concerned. So ruminants are going to produce the bacteria, fungi, and also the protozoa, and sometimes the virus, and many times the they are going to be affected with the ticks, maybe belonging to several ticks. Now, recently, the Hemospecialis finizera is one of the important toxic material being secreted by the particular transmitted from one man to the environment man, which is taken up as a heap somewhere else. So the then housing is also produced to the microbes, the fluid environment, and there is enormous quantity of the heat is produced. That's about here you can see that 39 plus or minus 2 degrees, about 104 or 103 type varieties are there. So the fluid environment like which requires the free water intake, about 85 to 90% of the water is consumed by the help of the ruminal microflora. So the guaranteed housing for 18 to 19 hours, and the guaranteed anaerobic housing, that's also additional personality to those animals. Then straw feed water buffaloes longer rumen residence then time for the microbes to grow very fast. Then small selective browsers, for example, the sheep and goats, they are also going to convert the same procedure. So garbage removal is caused by absorption of VFAs, then energy to the ruminant, and ultimately erection out, and finally passage of the indigenous or it's impossible to digest the cellulose, etc. We can't imagine even consuming even one grass blade, but the ruminants are the one they are going to digest, which is not wanted for us. So they, because of this thing, they are called as the better substrates. Saliva is also one of the important criteria, and food are depending upon the type of the food a person eats, then the nutritional pattern will be shown. So there is optimal growth for the environment for the growth as well as the production, but immediately whatever may be the condition, the calf is able to stand. That's what I can see. Whereas the pH is 6 to 7, always towards the acidic, and saliva contains bicarbonate ions and phosphate, whereas the cows produce about 50 liter of the ruminal, this inside the rumen, but it need to be extruded out, or we need to leave it as it is. So the pH need to be maintained by the saliva. Then here is the salivary glands, parotid salivary glands, the mandibular salivary glands, then this is the parotid mandibular, etc. So a cattle or roughage, whenever it is consumed by the cattle, it is directly going to the rumen. Later, after mastication, it is going to the abomasum and omasum. Lastly, it is not released, somebody may say. Optimal environment is also produced to almost all the bacteria. So, note down the normal pH of the stomach is 6.5.667, whereas the first person it goes to a person who is having the 6.7 or more pH. Then apart from that particular bacteria, which we can also request the controller to include us in the bus. Then symbiotic relationships. So it's a for mutual benefit ratio. Number one, the microbes or microorganisms, they produce the required material, especially if acting on ruminant and reticulum. So the ruminants can digest even worst come worst material like garbage removal. Then, of course, there will be a quality maintenance of that of the regular digestion, and sometimes the nutrients are totally different. Then optimal evaluation of the growth need to be conducted very properly. Then the microbes, this chart is more important. So lakhs of the microbes are there. That's the percent of mass of the total body. and the animal's body is consisting of different biomasses, and one among these things is the bacteria 60%, then the proteins are uh, so the here what we can say is the least capacity is of the fungi, and the highest capacity this is the content of the rumen is the bacteria, whereas, whereas the role of the reticulum and rumen is not well understood as on date. So bacterial population is very important in case of the microbial digestion. That's the number one, especially in case of the bacterial digestion. As you know very well, it is ranging from 10 raised to 6 to 10 raised to 7 counts per ml of the blood, whereas the 99.5% of the bacteria are obligate anaerobes. All those processes can be made, but we need a lot of patience and also the aim of producing large pathology, large populations of this bacteria. So now already it is 8 o'clock. We will uh, we will conclude after the end of the slides. Benefits of the bacterial attachment. It allows the bacteria to colonize the digestible surface of the feed particles. Then they bring enzymes from microbes and also the substrates from feedstuff to the rumen. Then they protect the microbial enzymes from proteases in the rumen. Then, if attachment is prevented or reduced, digestion of the cellulose is greatly reduced. Then, retention of the time of the microbes in the rumen is increased to greater extent. Then, the overfeeding of the fat to ruminants can coat forages, reducing bacterial attachment. Then later tomorrow we can see how much number of the microbial population is present in rumen, especially the pH, what's a pH, etc. So today we will conclude this class here itself. Tomorrow I do not know, or Monday we can meet. Tomorrow there are no classes. Monday we can meet with either this or with a new topic. And